All right, we want to bring in Fox News contributor Michelle Malkin. She joins us this morning from Colorado Springs, and she's going to provide some analysis for us this morning on the RNC. Good to see you this morning, Michelle.
Good to see you all. Thank you.
So we wanted to get right to this soundbite, because what is interesting is that there was some question as to what would the RNC put forth. And it turns out on stage, so many women and a lot of minority speakers. Take a look.
President Obama's version of America is a divided one, often pitting us against each other based on income level, gender, and social status. His policies have failed us.
Growing up, I never imagined a little girl from a border town could one day become a governor. But this is America. En América, todo es posible.
Her parents can't take her to a movie theater or to a restaurant, but they have her absolutely convinced that even if she can't have a hamburger at the Woolworth's lunch counter, she could be President of the United States if she wanted to be, and she becomes the Secretary of State.
So, Michelle, we want to get your reaction. It's obviously hard to argue that any of those women are not substantial women. What does that do to the Democrats' theme of a war on women?
Well, I think it blows it up, decimates it, and gives lie, I think, to the rhetoric, not just of the Democratic Party's campaign this year, but over 2-3 decades worth of public excoriating of the Republican Party, when there are so many conservative women who embrace the American dream, free markets, free minds. You look at how impressive the lineup was, and it goes through generations. There is a thread that runs from Condoleezza Rice to Susana Martinez to Nikki Haley and to the terrific rising star Mia Love. And I think this will resonate far beyond, rigid Republican lines, because this story, this narrative of people who've been able to come to this country, and this is particularly true of the first and second generation American women who spoke at the RNC, is something that transcends these narrow political lines that have been drawn, particularly by the Democratic Party when they talk about conservative women. The smearing, the misogyny that's been leveled against them by, I don't know, the super PAC donor Bill Maher, who's been the worst of the attackers on Republican women. And I think that these conservative women on the right have finally exposed that there is a war on women. It's the war that the left has waged on women who choose to leave the plantation that they've set.
And yet, Michelle, we see these poll numbers and female voters for the presidential election. We'll put this up on your screen. 48% for Obama and Biden versus 42% for Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan. And earlier on the show, we had a debate on the show between Angela McGlowan and Santita Jackson. And Santita's point was that it was great they had these minority speakers and women up on the stage. But when you looked at the delegates who were actually in the theater, about 1% African-American and fewer than around 30% women on the conservative side among the delegates. So it's great that they were up on the stage, but is that reflected in the folks who will actually go out to the polls? What do you say?
Well, I don't put much stock in the racial bean counting of Santita Jackson and her family and the likes of the traditional civil rights institution, which don't apply the same standards when you look at, I don't know, pictures of the Chicago headquarters of Obama, which are blindingly white. I need sunglasses when I look at them. Or the major liberal institutions that are always wagging their fingers at the Republican Party for not being diverse. Take a look at the editorial board of the New York Times. Again, it's like snow in the Rocky Mountains. I think that there's been this demonization over the last 20 years, and of course I've been in these battles for a long time, to try and make people who are conservatives in the Republican Party look like they've got horns and fangs. And I think that the effectiveness of the Republican National Convention was that finally they were able to do something that these Alinskyites have perfected, the art of storytelling. And the thing is that the stories that were told on the floor were true, as opposed to all the fables that we hear from the White House on down on the left.
But will it begin to narrow the gap in terms of the performance we saw from Mia Love, from Marco Rubio, from Susana Martinez? Will it begin to narrow the gap? Forget about the women. The gap between Hispanics and African Americans is immense. Will that narrow now post-RNC?
Well, that's a good question. And of course, when you have biased media organizations that are essentially journalistic tools for the Obama administration and the Democratic Party, pretending that they're neutral and then whitewashing all of these speeches out of their coverage, it makes it a little bit more difficult to make your case to the American people. However, there are far more ways to get the message out there. That's been the effectiveness of social media and transcending all of these information roadblocks that they've put up to control the narrative. And I think that the great impetus now, the great objective post-convention is for all of those inspired activists and delegates and people who watched the RNC and said to themselves, you know what, they're speaking for me, to then go ahead and amplify those messages, spread those stories, and talk to their neighbors and colleagues who have been brainwashed for the last 30 years into thinking that the Democratic Party serves the poor and the minorities best and women best, when their record shows the complete opposite.
Michelle, stick around, because we do want to talk to you about the big sort of water cooler issue, and that, of course, being what Dirty Harry said at the convention and what you thought of Clint Eastwood's speech. So stick around, because we want to know if you think that that's the mainstream media bias or if he was sort of off the reservation.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Stick around, Michelle. Welcome back, everybody. Clint Eastwood defied the liberal Hollywood stereotype with his memorable, shall we say, performance at the RNC. But if Tinseltown is supposed to be so tolerant, why can't he express his conservative views without being slammed?
Well,
Morris?
is that what they were slamming? We're back with Michelle Malkin to digest some of this, and was watching your Twitter stream that night, and it was pretty funny to watch everything that was being said on during the Clint Eastwood speech. You tweeted this: okay, I like Eastwood movies, but that was weird. So I mean, what is the liberal media saying when you saw these Hollywood types coming out like Roger Ebert wrote this? He said, Clint, my hero, is coming across as sad and pathetic. He didn't need to do this to himself. It's unworthy of him. So what did you think?
Yeah, well, I did think it was a little bit weird, but after dwelling on it and watching the replays a little bit more, I thought, this ended up being an unintendedly fantastic performance. And there's method to madness, of course. And this harkened back to the Bob Newhart skit. It was completely unscripted, obviously. And I think that unbuttoning the completely buttoned down straitjacket culture of most of these conventions was really an unorthodox thing to do. And of course, the big effect out of it that's so striking, and we saw this in social media the last couple of days, that's outburst, is it was cool. I mean, you now got this phenomenon of Eastwooding. But I think that this probably is why, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a second, but this is probably why there was such a vicious reaction from most of the left and the Hollywood left, the vulgarity that we saw, this idea this really obnoxious idea that perhaps he was demented or senile, and you saw a little suggestion of that with Roger Ebert and his colleagues, that this was so sad that he was being used. Come on, this is a Hollywood legend. He is certainly in his right mind, both capital R and lowercase r, and that still causes a lot of conniptions in Tinseltown.
Yeah, I mean, and he has a new movie coming out. I mean, he's a brilliant director. The notion that he was demented is absurd. I mean,
but the fact that we're talking about it and not talking about Romney and Rubio, that's how it hurts, right?
Well, no. I mean, I think you can do two things at once, and people can certainly look at this and reflect on it. But I think it exposes a lot of all of these liberal shibboleths. And I think maybe what it's going to do, probably one of the underplayed after effects of this, is encourage conservatives who are working undercover and in the closet in Hollywood to maybe, finally just say, you know what the heck? I'm out there. If he can do this, I will do it.
Well, he called out John Voight, but we already knew that he was a conservative. That wasn't a surprise one that he mentioned.
Yeah. There were some interesting people that came out and supported him, and we covered this on Twitchy.com, which is my Twitter curation site. People like Kirstie Alley and Blake Shelton tweeted their attaboys at Clint Eastwood, and I think that a lot of these Hollywood people who may be sort of center or even just maybe politically agnostic, seeing how unhinged some of their colleagues are, is providing them with some inspiration to be more bold in their own daily dealings in Hollywood. And that's a good thing. Thank you, Clint.
All right, Michelle Malkin, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts on all of this, and we'll try to share the Kirstie Alley tweet later, too.
We will.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank
You bet. Take